Matt Poitras gets loaned to the World Junior Championship. We'll talk about what to expect for him from Team Canada and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High. And on today's show, we'll start off by talking about Matt Poitras of the Boston Bruins getting loaned to Team Canada for the World Junior Championship. Something we talked about, but didn't really truly fully expect. So we'll get into kind of why he was loaned over, how that fares for his development, and especially what to expect from him at this tournament. In our second segment, we'll discuss a head-to-head of Gauthier versus Ryan Leonard. These two prospects were fairly similar in terms of where they went in the draft and what to expect from them. So we'll kind of talk about how they compare head-to-head. They're both playing for Boston College, so it's a pretty easy comparison. And we'll end things off with a question, a very interesting question we got over on Twitter for a mailbag segment coming over tomorrow, but we couldn't wait. We thought we'd dedicate a whole segment to this. Basically, we'll be doing a top 10 draft for the World Junior Championship in terms of the prospects that are going to be there. So it's going to be fairly interesting. Make sure to stick all the way to the end. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So let's get started right away with Matt Poitras. The news just came out this morning as of recording. And yeah, it's very, very interesting to know that Matt Poitras, the second-round pick in 2022 of the Boston Bruins, who made the roster out of camp due to very impressive performances, will be loaned over to the World Juniors. First, do you think this is a good idea for his development?
Yes, of course. It's going to be fun as well. It's going to be entertaining beyond everything else. But in terms of his development, I think that giving him the opportunity to dominate against his age group is excellent because he hasn't really had the opportunity to fully do that. Like, sure, last year in the OHL, 95 points in 63 games, only 16 goals in that. Like, he was definitely a playmaker first and foremost there with Guelph. But I think that giving him a shot to really dominate against his own age group, where he's one of the very few like full-time NHLers that's going to be at this tournament. Is he the only one? Is there anyone else apart from him that's like playing Luneau, right? He's been like a halftime.
Probably the only.
He's been a halftime NHLer. Like,
yeah.
I think we're going to see a Matthew Poitras in fine form and in high confidence. So it's going to be very, very exciting. And Team Canada just got a new first-line center.
Absolutely. I think he slots really well with the top players that they have. I mean, you've got Matt Savoy, you've got Connor Geekie, a couple other players. I mean, Macklin Celebrini could be in that conversation. I feel like those two could gel really well together based on their play styles. So, yeah, I mean,
Minton is in contention for that too.
Absolutely, for sure. But yeah, I mean, if you look at his game, this is a player who consistently creates advantages on the ice, especially in the offensive zone. The way that he locks players out of puck battles with his positioning, he can outmuscle and outwork 6'3", 6'4" defensemen easily. He's been getting shifts against some really, really good defensemen. We're talking like Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power and those kind of guys. And he's come out of the corner with the puck like a bunch of times. So he's fairly interesting in the way that he approaches puck battles, but also there's a translatability to his game that's really good because he's constantly, he doesn't ever stop doing something. He's constantly doing something on the ice. As he leaves a board battle, he's already presenting a stick to receive the puck. As he's receiving a pass, he's already thinking about his next one or the shot he's going to take. He sets up his moves with really good handles. I mean, there's a fluidity and a cohesiveness or a skill set that really, really works in the NHL. And that proves kind of why it's so important to have that cohesion in your skill set. I mean, a lot of players with more skill than Matt Poitras, with better physicality, with better skating, don't make the NHL because their skill set doesn't work together. It's individual things that make them good. It's not the total package. Yeah, I think that's the separating factor for Poitras. And yeah, how impressive has he been this year, right? I mean, he's already. We were talking a bit about the show before the show, and you said he's already better than you thought he would be at his best.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No,
talk me through
exactly.
that.
I mean, like in his draft year, I watched quite a bit of the Guelph Storm. I was a pretty big fan of Danny Zhilka, and I was enjoying I was having an interesting experience with my D-1 viewings of Cam Allen, and I had
Yeah,
a lot more questions. I was like, am I sure this is a top 10 player? Well, clearly
he
did not
wasn't.
end up being the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I remember in that season, like I saw a lot of public scouts really like Poitras, and a lot of public scouts really not see with Poitras.
Mhm.
And I was in the latter camp for my viewings, and I saw a player that had some interesting tools. I saw some really interesting flashes, but I didn't expect him to be the type of player that would be able to put all of these strengths together into, as you said, one cohesive package. And
Yeah.
that just wasn't really something that I expected would happen at all, let alone within a year's time. And well, we're here now, and he's a pretty impactful player on one of the better teams in the NHL as a 19-year-old. And he's going to be likely a first liner for Team Canada now at the World Junior Championship, which I really would not have expected to happen. So his progression has been so impressive. And it also goes to show that, like, yes, like us scouts are always looking at draft eligibles, right? And we're looking at 17, 18-year-old players, and development continues beyond that point, right? Like a lot of this is guesswork. It's hedging bets, and
Yeah.
Matthew Poitras was not a bet I was really willing to hedge on in that 2022 NHL draft. I think I had him ranked real low. Like I had him like I would side my top 3 rounds of ranked players, like way too low. But
Mhm.
something that you can learn from, but it's also indicative of just how it's so variable. It has so many different factors. It depends how well the team's able to develop their talent, how well the junior organization works with the team to perfect that development path. It goes down to the individual player and how they're able to put like, separate skills into one cohesive package.
Yep.
The psychology of sports as well. Like there's countless factors that make or break NHL players and on their paths to their end goals. And Poitras just kind of hit the hyperspeed button and improved tenfold basically in a year span. So
Yeah.
a fascinating development curve, and I look forward to actually going back and watching like D-1 draft year, D+1, D+2 tape with him to really track how that progression's happened, because I didn't see it coming at all, and there's definitely something that I can personally learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at just looking at the point totals, you can tell something happened there. I mean, he went from 21 goals and 29 assists for 50
Yeah.
points in 68 games in this draft year. Nothing much. The year after, he scores 5 fewer goals, but 79 assists. Like, what
Yeah.
happened there?
50
Like, he
more
went,
assists.
yeah,
5 less goals, but 50 more assists.
that's ridiculous. Yeah, so 95 points in 63 games, 79 of which were assists. And yeah, this year's in the NHL. Just that year to year progression just doesn't make sense. You never see this. So it's really interesting. And I think that this kind of development path for Poitras has gotten, like you said, he hit the hyperspeed button on the development curve.
Yeah.
But like there's also just a fact that, you know, just developing one skill can revolutionize a player, or just combining two of your existing skills in ways that you weren't before can just revolutionize a player entirely. And we're seeing it with Poitras this year. I think it's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to see how he does it this World Juniors, because, like you said, he's one of maybe two current NHL, like bona fide NHLers in the at the World Juniors. Even though Yuri Kulik is on the way, but we'll get to that later on. That's it for this first segment. We're going to face off Cutter Gauthier and Ryan Leonard in a head-to-head in our second segment. We'll talk about their projections and which one we like best after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers Stay Hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins that you can spend on anything. ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and far more. Whether you want to bet on your favorite team to win the Super Bowl or your least favorite quarterback to throw 3 interceptions in the next game, the choice is yours with FanDuel. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, so let's move on to our second segment. We'll talk about Cutter Gauthier versus Ryan Leonard in a head-to-head. These are two fairly interesting prospects. I think they have very similar kind of skill sets. Even though I'd say Leonard's is a bit more linear, well, a bit less linear and a bit more shot heavy.
Yeah.
I think both of them have some pretty similar tools, and overall their frame is pretty similar. The way that they play is pretty similar. Talk me through their seasons so far, and yeah, obviously Cutter Gauthier is a year ahead, but kind of where do you compare last year's Cutter Gauthier to this year's Ryan Leonard?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I think that like in terms of the draft years, I liked Leonard a lot more last year than I did like Cutter Gauthier in 2022, and that gap has closed since then. Like Cutter Gauthier has been playing some really good hockey at the NCAA level. Like he's made for hockey against bigger, harder competition. But that said, I think that Ryan Leonard has a versatility to his game that Gauthier lacks. While Gauthier, yes, is a more capable centerman than Leonard, both are at their best while playing on the wing in my viewings. And Leonard brings a lot more to that game. I like that Leonard has some really interesting playmaking tools and deception that he uses to create space for his line mates, and his defensive game is a clear strength. Whereas with Cutter Gauthier, like yes, the goal scoring, the shooting is on par or maybe even a bit better than Ryan Leonard, which is saying quite a bit. But I think that the surrounding tools around that and the surrounding habits around that aren't quite as refined. Even right now, like comparing Cutter Gauthier right now to Ryan Leonard right now, I think that Leonard has some better habits. That said, in terms of how they're going to be at the World Juniors, Cutter Gauthier is going to get more minutes. He's going to get more opportunities. He's a year older, and that always plays a big role at these tournaments. But I still think that if you gave Ryan Leonard the same amount of minutes as you did Cutter Gauthier, whether that be at Boston College or with Team USA, I think he can put in just as good, if not a better shift than Gauthier. And I'm a very big fan of Ryan Leonard.
I get where you're coming from, but I can't count out Cutter Gauthier. There's a directness to his game that you rarely see in prospects. He doesn't go by 3 ways. He knows exactly where to go and how to go there. And I mean, you look at the totals last year for Gauthier. I mean, 16 goals, 21 assists, 37 points in 32 games. With Ryan Leonard currently on 18 points in 17 games. I mean, Gauthier was on a higher point per game pace last year with less surrounding skill. Yeah, with less surrounding skill. I mean, he had Lone Cooley, but that Perreault, Leonard, Smith line wasn't there. So yeah, I mean, I just beyond the point totals, I just think that Cutter Gauthier has some elements to his physical toolkit that Ryan Leonard doesn't have yet. Even though Ryan Leonard is a really good puck battler, and he's able to win his fair share of battles, there's a combination of size and speed that Gauthier brings to the game that combines extremely, extremely well with his direct kind of method on the ice. You can be big and fast, but not use it well. I think Gauthier uses his toolkit extremely well. So yeah, I mean, I again, I understand where you're coming from. I don't want to count out Cutter Gauthier as kind of the better player here because it is a lot tighter. Than you would think for a player who was drafted 5th overall last year versus a player who was drafted 9th overall. This 8th, I think, or something like that. Like this past summer, like there's a gap in their rankings. But I'd say Gauthier was in a draft year that wasn't as strong as last year, and I'm fairly impressed with what Ryan Leonard was able to do in last year's draft, and it's hard because Leonard was playing with Will Smith and Gabe Perreault on one of the best lines in all of junior hockey, right? Like that plays a role into it, doesn't it?
For sure, but he was also he was the heart of that line. He wasn't the brains or the most skilled part of that line, but he was the heart. Like he was he was the player that would put in a shift defensively that would allow Will Smith and Gabe Perreault to play on the same line. If you have a different right winger there, it doesn't really work as well because his two line mates didn't exactly give him much support defensively in any of the three zones, even in terms of like forechecking and stuff. Like all the dirty work fell into Ryan Leonard, and he did it so well. On top of being again a clear like big goal scoring threat on that line, he's the clear power forward on that line. It's a very clear role for sure, but and it plays to his strengths. Like obviously, like that line plays to the strengths of all three pieces. That's why it's such a strong line. But
yeah,
I think that Ryan Leonard would thrive in any environment. I think he's the type of player that you can put on any line, and he's going to put in almost as good as of a shift as he is with these two line mates. Like I think he's of the three players, I think he's the one whose success depends the least on playing with the two others. I think he's a lot more versatile in terms of who you can play him with and where he would succeed. Because he's kind of a plug and play player. And Cutter Gauthier is to an extent as well, for sure. Like there's a reason we're comparing these two here in this segment. They have a lot of similarities. Like these are two highly intelligent power forwards that know how to create advantages both with their strength, but also their positioning and their release. And yeah, I still am sliding Ryan Leonard here. I think that with him, Washington has a lot more options of how they can develop him than Philadelphia does with Cutter Gauthier. I think in Cutter Gauthier, you're getting a power forward in the second line, and that's kind of like maybe a complementary piece on a top line. Like you could see Michkov and Gauthier doing quite well on the same line. Like I could definitely envision that. But with Washington, like you can have Leonard in just about any role on any wing, like either side on any line, and he's going to put in a really, really, really good shift. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Ryan Leonard, obviously, and it's why I'm in his corner here, which might be a bit of a hot take. I don't think I'm riding with consensus here and siding with Leonard over Gauthier, especially in terms of how good they are right now and not projection. But I'm a big fan of players that are able to be so versatile, and I think with Gauthier, if you're able to limit his ability to leverage his physicality to create advantages around the slot, you lose a lot of what makes him so good. And with Ryan Leonard, you can't defend him because whatever you're going to defend, he's going to find other ways to bypass those situations. And I think that Gauthier is a little bit more linear in that sense.
I don't know. I feel like you're not giving Gauthier enough credit for his versatility. He's a really good playmaker. His ability to play give and go at the blue line that's really impressed me, especially like in the progression since his draft year. You know, since leaving that Gauthier Cooley Snuggerud line, he's gotten so many more opportunities to play that kind of incremental playmaking game that I really like. I've been fairly I've gotten more impressed in recent viewings by his playmaking ability, but on top of that, it's just his defensive game so well. He can play center and win faceoffs. He can, he can put a stick in the right lanes in the right moments. He can play on the power play, on the penalty kill. Like there is a decent amount of versatility to Gauthier's game, and I feel like Gauthier has grown a lot since this draft year in terms of that. Yeah. Like in this draft year, I would probably have given his comparison as being like a Josh Anderson type, where it's like he's good at doing one thing and he does it really well, which is like barreling down the side of the barreling down the boards and like
overextended.
Right. But like he's understood that doesn't work. His time in the NCAA has taught him well. And he's developed his game in incremental ways that have made me really impressed. But let us know down below what you think between these two prospects. And that's it for our second segment. We'll get into our third segment where we talk about a very interesting question we received in our mailbag segments. We'll draft a World Juniors top 10 after these messages from our sponsors over at Game Time. If your schedule changes a lot like mine and you want to buy tickets at the last minute, there is no better place to do that than Game Time. Game Time is a great app that allows you to buy tickets up until the last minute of the event and sometimes an hour after it starts. My schedule changes around a lot. I can find myself with an afternoon free out of nowhere. And Game Time is really useful in terms of helping me get tickets at the last minute when I want to catch an event, whether that's hockey or football or really any sport, but beyond sports, you can even get tickets for comedy, theater, anything that requires tickets. Game Time has you covered. They've got a bunch of deals and are obsessed with saving you money. My favorite is zone deals, where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seat, and that gives you an average of about 18% of savings. And the Game Time guarantee makes sure that if you find tickets in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super easy. Just create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so let's end things off with our top 10 draft. What an interesting and well thought out question. I was really surprised. But yeah, we're gonna kind of break down what our top 10 draft would be for the World Junior Championships among the prospects that are at the World Juniors right now. I think it depends how you see this, but I based it off of who would be the best players right now. So what would the top 10 best players be at the World Juniors?
Not
otherwise,
projection.
I mean, because otherwise, if you're projecting, then it's like, I mean, you got Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith. It gets kind of difficult, but like, let's talk about what the top 10 would be right now. Do you want to start off with who your top player would be?
Yeah, I mean, I went with Lane Hutson, which I'm sure is a shock to all. Yeah, I think Lane Hutson is going to be a tournament where Team USA just tells him, like, you go do your thing. He's been playing like almost 30 minutes a night with Boston University this season, which is just stupid. And the level of competition at this tournament is going to be weaker than what he's used to playing at the NCAA level. So, yeah, I think that Lane Hutson is going to do a lot of damage, and especially if it's being paired with a guy like Ryan Chesley, where it's like, okay, you got one stay-at-home guy back there. You just go marauding through the offensive zone, do your thing. I think that Hutson is a good shout here for the top slot, but I will preface it like this was a painful ranking to make, because I have like a clear like top 4, top 5, and you have to like rank those in some order, find a way to order them, and then I have a tier from like 6 to like 25, and it's like, okay, who do we include? Who doesn't? Who gets the snub? But yeah, honestly, like this is not the World Junior class where I'd be wanting to do a fantasy draft, because like I'd be picking a guy that other people have projected like 30th into the top 5. But hey, it's fun. It's going to be like quite a bit of parity among the top tiers here, which is interesting. Makes this ranking practice a bit more interesting. But you have a different player at first overall, though I think we both have the player that
the same top 2
first overall at second.
Yeah,
so like
we got the same top 2. But my first overall pick is Jiri Kulik. I think this will be fairly interesting. I don't. It's tough because Czechia will struggle at this tournament, especially with how good Team USA, Team Sweden are. I mean, obviously Team Canada. Like, there are a lot of really good teams in this tournament, but Czechia always seems to find a way, and a lot of why they're able to do that in recent years is Jiri Kulik. He's just so good at these tournaments, so good against his age group. And this is his final year of eligibility. He's going to be one of the older players at this tournament, and I feel like he's got a great opportunity to kind of showcase how his NHL projection has continued. And yeah, I mean, we're talking about a sharpshooter who was the leader of the team last year, and like was the main reason they were in the race for the medal rounds. And like, yeah, I mean, there's just so much to like about Jiri Kulik's game, and yeah, I can't see a world in which Kulik doesn't kind of cement himself as one of the top prospects in this tournament, because he's always excelled at it. But yeah, third overall, I went with Matt Poitras. I think Poitras is going to be fairly. I mean, he's going to be the top line center for Team Canada, and like you said, he's the only full-time NHLer at this tournament, and it's got to be worth something.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, he's going to be able to put that translatability in his game to practice and showcase that like there is a massive gap between men's league games and junior games. And yeah, against his age group, I don't think it's even going to be fair, but you got him 5th overall.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I still have questions about his game. Like, as I was mentioning earlier in the episode, like I've never been like super high on his projection. I'm putting him at 5th because he's the only full-time NHLer, and he's likely going to make a big impact here. But I think that this tournament is like a address some of the questions I still have. So I went with the high end skill above the established NHL talent at 3 and 4 on my board. So I went with Will Smith and Max Celebrini, and you have Celebrini at 4 as well. Or no, 5.
I actually have him back to back right after Poitras. So you just swapped.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I went with Smith and Celebrini. I think that you're going to see Will Smith really excel because he's either going to be playing second line minutes with the elite line with Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault, or he's going to be playing top line minutes with like Cutter Gauthier and Jimmy Snuggerud. So either way, he's in an excellent position to succeed. And I think that he's going to make a big impact. Matthew Celebrini is a bigger asterisk next to, because we've seen Team Canada not always favor their draft eligible players at these tournaments, like with Adam Fantilli last year. I fear something similar might happen if Celebrini doesn't blow the doors off in the first game. But I think if he's given top 6 minutes, he will quickly ascend to be Canada's most impactful offensive piece.
Yeah, for sure. At 6 overall, though, we have the same player in this Cutter Gauthier. I think this one's a gimme. He's going to be playing with Will Smith more likely than not. And those two have been playing really well in Boston College. I expect that to continue. So yeah, I mean, it's gonna be pretty fun to watch those two play off each other because they've got pretty complementary skill sets. But at 7th overall, I've got a player who you didn't even rank in your top 10. And it's Cutter Gauthier. Gauthier is. Sorry, not Gauthier. Connor Geeky. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Connor Geeky, a player you didn't even rank in your top 10. And I get it. You're not the biggest fan of Geeky. Yeah, I get that you're not the biggest fan of Geeky, but I just feel like this is the tournament where he's going to shine and show that, maybe Arizona was on to something. Arizona has this knack of just picking the biggest guy available in each round. That makes sense within the rankings. And Geeky's he's been pegged as this kind of big guy who doesn't really play all that well. But I mean, watching him this year with Wenatchee, he's been really, really good. I mean, he's been better than Matt Savoy for me, who's at 8th overall. Yeah. And that's why I ranked him this way. But you also don't have
rank.
Exactly, which is so fun. But
I'm so anti Wenatchee Wild apparently in this ranking. No, like both those players are completely within the tier that reaches up into this top 10. Like they're easily HMs for me, without a doubt. But I went with Ryan Leonard at 7, so I have him right behind Cutter Gauthier. And while yes, I was arguing in the last segment that I have Leonard ahead of Gauthier, Gauthier is going to get more minutes in this tournament, especially if we're saying in fantasy contexts. I think that Gauthier is likely going to be more impactful in this tournament specifically. But I think that Leonard is really going to etch himself into that role of impactful top 6 piece for Team USA. And it's such a dominant lineup. But I think that he makes the cut for top 10 in this tournament. And I followed up with a play that you have ranked 9th overall. I have ranked 8th in Denton Matejchuk, a Columbus Blue Jackets draft pick who was a pretty late cut in camp this year and is probably the best defenseman in the CHL this season. And he's been playing some excellent hockey with Moose Jaw. And he should be getting a lot of offensive opportunities with Team Canada at this tournament. So while he's not quite Lane Hudson, he is very, very good at hockey, and he's going to get offensive opportunities. So he made the cut for my top 8. I personally finish it off with 2 Swedes. And you have one of those too, and Noah Östlund in your top 10.
Absolutely. But I understand how Liam Ögren can be like the probably the better player of this lineup, but I feel like Östlund is going to break out of this tournament and really separate himself from the pack. I hope so as well. He's fantastic. I've always been a huge fan of his, so I'm looking forward to that. But Liam Ögren is also in this conversation. He was an honorable mention for me. He was the last guy I cut out with Ryan Leonard. Those were the 2 guys I just barely left out of this lineup. But I mean, if we go through the honorable mentions, Jimmy Snuggerud has to be in there. Jonathan Lekkerimäki has to be in there. There's an argument for both USA goaltenders, whichever one makes the cut. I mean, they're both fantastic goaltenders.
Even Adam Gajan in terms of potential World Juniors impact, absolutely. Like he has the track record for sure.
After what he did last year.
Yeah, exactly. You can't doubt him at this tournament.
100%. Otherwise, Filip Mešár for Slovakia might be their best player. You could put Dalibor Dvorsky in there, maybe Edward Shala.
Seamus Casey.
Seamus Casey as well, but I think the big one is Tristan Luneau. I think that if there was one guy I would absolutely put in my top 10 who I think really should be in my top 10, Probably Tristan Luneau, given what he's been doing in the NHL so far. But yeah, that wraps it up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They're a 24/7 news channel for sports that's up on the Locked On channel. And make sure to tune in for our next show as we go through our mailbag questions and break down some of our listeners' questions here so far. So this is